There's this brand new report out from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and let me tell you, it paints a pretty startling picture of American household debt. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the key numbers, what's really driving them, and what it all means for the economy. And, of course, for your wallet. All right, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and start with the headline number. According to the Fed, total U.S. household debt has just hit a jaw-dropping $18.59 trillion. I mean, that's a number so big, it's almost meaningless, right? It's hard to even process. So how do you even wrap your head around that? Well, let's try this. If you chop up that massive number and hand it out to every single person in the U.S., we're talking about $114,000 of debt for every man, woman, and child. Yeah, suddenly it doesn't feel so abstract anymore, does it? Okay, but a big number is just a big number. What's really got people worried is the direction things are heading. You see, for a while, during the pandemic, something weird happened. People were actually paying their bills on time more than ever before, and delinquency rates hit historic lows. But now, that's totally flipping around. Delinquency rates are creeping back up towards those pre-pandemic levels, and that, my friends, is a major red flag. And this is where we get to the real heart of the issue. Because the problem isn't just how much debt there is, it's about who is struggling to hold it. The experts have a name for this, and you're going to hear it a lot. They're calling it a K-shaped crisis. So to really get what that K-shape means, we got to look under the hood at what this debt is actually made of. Now, yeah, mortgages are the big kahuna, no surprise there. But I want you to look at that slice for credit cards. We're talking over $1 trillion. And that right there is where the ticking time bomb is for a lot of folks. And here's why that's so dangerous. The average interest rate on a credit card right now, it's sitting at about 24%. Some are even pushing 30. I mean, at those kinds of rates, it's practically impossible to pay down what you owe. You're just paying interest on interest. Some analysts are straight up calling it a modern form of loan sharking. It's a trap, and it's designed to keep you right where you are, in debt. So, what is this K-shaped economy thing exactly? Well, picture the letter K. After a big economic shock, you have one group whose fortunes go up. That's the top arm of the K. And then you have another group whose fortunes go, well, down. That's the bottom arm. Two totally different experiences. And this really breaks it down for you. You've got two different Americas living side by side. On that top arm of the K, you have folks whose stock portfolios are at record highs, their home equity is soaring, things are great. But then you look at that bottom arm, and that's where you see a huge part of the country where savings are just gone. Wages aren't keeping up, and credit cards are basically maxed out just to buy groceries. You know, if you want a gut punch of a real-world example, look no further than Dollar General. In a recent report, they basically said their core customers are tapped out, financially exhausted. I mean, think about that for a second. The discount store is losing customers because people can't afford the discount store. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the bottom leg of that K, I don't know what does. So the picture is pretty grim. The big question is, how on earth did we get here? Well, analysts have pinpointed 4 main culprits, and they've given them a pretty dramatic name: the 4 horsemen of the debt apocalypse. All right, so who are these 4 horsemen? We're talking about the inflation hangover, the interest rate spike, the savings evaporation, and the wage stagnation trap. And look, any one of these on its own would be bad enough. But the problem is they all hit at the same time, creating this absolute perfect storm for family budgets. Let's dig into each. First up, the inflation hangover. Now, you hear that the rate of inflation is cooling, and that's true. But here's the thing. Prices are still way, way higher than they were in 2020. We're talking 25 to 30% higher on everyday stuff. And since most people's paychecks haven't jumped that much, they've had to use credit cards just to bridge the gap. Horseman number 2, the interest rate spike. So, to fight that inflation we just talked about, the Federal Reserve jacked up interest rates faster than they have in 40 years. And what did that do? It made all that variable rate debt, especially credit card debt, insanely more expensive right at the exact moment people were relying on it most. Talk about a double whammy. All right, number 3, the great savings evaporation. Remember during the pandemic when everyone was saving money? Americans had piled up something like $2.1 trillion in extra savings. It was a nice cushion, a buffer against hard times. Well, it's gone. Poof. That entire safety net has been completely burned through, leaving millions of families one emergency away from disaster. And the last horseman? Well, this one's been riding for a long, long time. It's the wage stagnation trap. For decades now, workers have been getting more and more productive, but their paychecks just haven't kept up. You want a crazy stat? Back in 1965, the average CEO made about 21 times what their typical worker did. Today, it's 344 times. The math just doesn't work for the average person anymore. Okay, so at this point, you might be thinking, wow, that's really tough for those families, but why should I care? How does this affect the whole economy? And that's a fair question. This is where we see personal debt spiral into a problem for everyone. It's actually pretty simple. The American economy is basically a giant engine, and that engine has one primary fuel source, you, consumer spending. It makes up a whopping 70% of our entire GDP. When we spend, the economy grows. It's really that straightforward. So, what happens when the consumer runs out of gas? What happens when that engine starts to sputter? Right now, households are forking over hundreds of billions of dollars a year just on interest payments. And think about it. Every dollar that goes to a credit card company is a dollar that isn't being spent at a local restaurant or on a new car or on stuff that actually keeps the economy humming. And this is where we get into a potential doom spiral, where the dominoes start to topple. First, you get this interest drag that slows down the whole economy. Second, as more people can't pay their bills, it puts a ton of stress on banks, especially smaller regional ones. And third, it puts the Fed in an impossible position. Do they keep rates high to fight inflation, or do they cut them to stop a recession? They're trapped. Okay, I know that was a lot of doom and gloom. So let's pivot. Let's move from just understanding the problem to figuring out what on earth you can do about it. We're going to go through a financial playbook now, some concrete steps you can take to protect yourself. All right, first, if you're currently carrying debt, here's your game plan. Step 1 is the hardest, but it's the most important. You have to face the monster. Get all your bills out, make a list of everything you owe and what the interest rate is. You got to know what you're up against. Step 2, you go on the attack. You target the debt with the highest interest rate first. That's called the avalanche method, and it'll save you the most money. And step 3, please do not be afraid to ask for help. There are great nonprofit credit counselors out there who can help you make a plan. Now, what if you're in a good spot and you're debt-free? First of all, that's awesome. But this is not the time to get smug. Step 1 is to stay humble, because as we've seen, things can change in a hurry. Step 2 is to double check your defenses. Build up that emergency fund. The goal is 3 to 6 months of living expenses tucked away. And finally, step 3, just keep your eyes open. Pay attention to what's happening in the broader economy, because eventually those waves can reach your shore. So what's the end game here? Where is this all heading over the next year or so? Well, the analysis basically lays out 3 possible futures. The super optimistic, best case scenario is a soft landing, inflation cools, the Fed cuts rates, and we dodge the bullet. The pessimistic view, that doom spiral we talked about kicks in and we head into a recession. But the most realistic path is probably somewhere in the middle. The economy slows down, things get sluggish, and this K-shaped reality we're living in just continues. And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. We talk a lot about personal finance, about making good choices. But looking at all this, you have to ask yourself, is this really a crisis of millions of people making bad personal choices? Or is it a crisis of decades of policy choices that have built a system where it's incredibly hard for the average person to win? It's something we all need to think about.